Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this week's last edition of The Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and here's what we have in store for you this evening.
Comrade Gwede Mantashe, in dealing with this problem of energy, has said, President, why don't we set up another state-owned entity?
President Ramaphosa warms up to an idea from his energy minister, but analysts don't think it's a good idea. One of them tells us why.
We are going to request and demand and insist.
Ramaphosa's ANC detractors, meanwhile, have upped the ante, adding to calls for him to step down. Another new coalition on the cards for Nelson Mandela Bay. We speak to the chief architect, DA Federal Chairperson Helen Zille. We also speak to friends of the free internet who are on a campaign to ensure that the poor do indeed get free data that the government keeps promising. All that coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts now. A new sister, brother to Eskom? That's the question now after President Cyril Ramaphosa's comments this morning at the elective Congress of the South African Communist Party.
If the state is to effectively support growth and development as envisaged in Ready to Govern, then it needs to have sufficient capital, skills, and must highlight the use of technology as one of the key enablers in the modern times. It needs to be efficient, it also needs to be innovative, but it also needs to be competitive. Even if we will have state entities competing against each other. For instance, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, in dealing with this problem of energy, has said, President, why don't we set up another state-owned entity so that we lessen our risks just as they are exposed in one entity? And I've said, I agree with him.
Lungile Mashele is an energy economist. She joins us on the line via Zoom. Good evening, Lungile. Thanks very much for your time. Another state-owned power utility.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. It looks like we're sort of running out of ideas at this point. If we're trying to solve load shedding by introducing another state-owned entity, an Eskom 2.0, that will still be owned by the same shareholder, and I assume it will still belong to, let's say, Eskom Holdings. I'm trying to really understand what the difference would be between Eskom version 1 and Eskom version 2. What do they aim to do differently? And more importantly, what will this entity do that Eskom is currently not doing? And that's the key thing, ultimately.
Yeah, logic and common sense would suggest that perhaps, maybe I should say, people would perhaps give this idea a chance or give the government the benefit of a doubt if they were able or if they had resolved Eskom's problems.
Absolutely. But the truth of the matter is how we found ourselves here is as a result of the ruling party and their indecision and their inaction when they were asked to step in 1997 already, when there were threats of not having sufficient capacity. We find ourselves in this position because when they did eventually step in through the New Build program, through their investment arm, they encouraged corruption. At Midupi, Usile, Ngula, they invested in that entity, which then they got a 5,000% ROI on what actually happened there. This is the same government that today is unable to offer viable solutions to our energy crisis. And instead, they are telling us that they're going to come up with another entity. How is this entity going to get funded? And if this entity can get funding, then why aren't we sorting out Eskom's more than 400 billion rand debt? You know, if this entity can be successful and can be viable and you're going to attract all these skills and all these talent, why are we not able to do that at the current Eskom as it is? And so duplicating an entire process is not going to get you out of the problem that you currently face, unfortunately.
Now, okay, I mean, the details are scant. I mean, all the president indicated was that he had, at the very least, warmed up to the idea, and in the absence of any other detail, we can only speculate at this stage. What if they have come to realize that, and I'm saying this also on the back of an interview our colleague Francis had with the Eskom CEO, who seems not to, I mean, went on and on about the problems he was experiencing there. What if they have realized, come to realize that they cannot, or Eskom cannot, for lack of a better word, unlearn, you know, some of the things that have put it in the situation that it is in now. And so perhaps they're thinking, oh, well, maybe if we start something from scratch, maybe that's the key to getting out of the situation that we are in now with respect to Eskom.
I actually wish it were that simple. And you know, one has to think about, Eskom is currently in the process of unbundling. So you've got the generation company, the transmission company, the distribution company. The transmission company has already been formed. You've got a situation where the Eskom board has been requesting for additional board members for Eskom Holdings, as well as for the transmission company. They've been having back and forth with the minister at DPE, and they still have not finalized that. If you cannot even appoint board members to an entity, how do you think then that you're going to form another state-owned entity, capacitated the way that it has to be capacitated? The failures at Eskom are not necessarily those of Eskom alone. So coming up with the new entity seems good, nice in principle, it's something fresh. But truth be told, Eskom, one of the very key things, they're in this mess due to financial issues. They have not been able to collect a proper cost-reflective tariff for a number of years, in fact, for a very, very long time. We know that currently Eskom is owed about 100 billion through the regulatory clearing account like a NERSA. So, I mean, if you were to capacitate Eskom just by unleashing what is owed to them, would they not be a better entity then? And one has to wonder that this new entity, will it be capacitated properly? Will it be funded properly? Will it have adequate tariffs in order to attract investment as well? And if you're not able to do it at version 1, I highly doubt that you know what has to happen in version 2.
And of course, I mean, in the current arrangement, those who can generate electricity outside of Eskom, they still have to go, you know, give it to Eskom, you know, for it to get into the grid, which complicates things even further. And you also have, you know, I remember the big announcement about people who could generate up to 100 megawatts. You know, that too has kind of, in a sense, fallen by the wayside. At the very least, it has hardly started precisely because there is no environment conducive to these arrangements, which in themselves also depend on an ESCOM.
Absolutely. I mean, let's just go into the generators that we currently have in the country. We have what we call our independent power producers, which are doing renewables as well as gas, and they are online and they still need to sell via ESCOM. You've got ESCOM itself, which a couple of years ago, through a PPP framework, was able to build Sere wind farm. If the government feels like they should be more, competitive, and they should look at more, innovative ways. This has been done in the past, and we're seeing it with the IPPs, and we've seen it even internally, within ESCOM. What's so hard about saying we would like ESCOM renewables to play a more prominent role, to be able to compete with the IPPs then? But you see, there's no need to rephrase and come up with like a new wheel. We already have ESCOM renewables within ESCOM already. They have the competence and the skills. How difficult is it then to enter into PPP arrangements in order to facilitate additional capacity? And I just feel like, that government really wants to skirt around certain issues and act like they are also not responsible for the challenges that ESCOM is facing, that the industry is facing in its entirety. You were speaking about the 100 megawatts and various IPPs also. They are hamstrung by what's happening at DFFE, the environmental affairs. The EIAs are taking forever. Water use licenses are taking months. They are hamstrung by what's happening with ESCOM and their cost estimate letters, with problems at NERSA licensing. If you're not resolving that, coming up with a second entity is a waste of everybody's time and taxpayers' money, ultimately.
Mm-hmm. So it can be... Just on the back of your very last comment, doesn't necessarily mean that if, for example, the government was to say, because we've been waiting for the whole week, there have been promises of a president coming up and addressing the nation even about, the way forward. No one knows yet what it is exactly that he'll be able to say, or what will have given him any hope that things will change for the better. But what if he was to say, look, we are dealing with the ESCOM problem, and this is how we're dealing with it. We are also ensuring that all the parties you've mentioned, all the contributors are doing. We'll fast-track those processes. We deal with the NERSA question, for example. We reduce the amount of time that people would need for approvals and so on. We heard earlier in the week ESCOM saying we are giving some land, to some of these entities right next to ESCOM so that it's easy for them to, give us what they can give us. In other words, he comes and says, we are dealing with those two, but we are also thinking about this particular entity. In other words, where he makes a case and says it doesn't have to be one or the other, it can be all of these things. What would you say to that?
The only way I see another entity perhaps making sense is if you're talking about this entity buying out the existing IPPs. And I say this purely because those IPPs have government guarantees, and that is a strain on South Africa's fiscus currently. And if they were talking about buying out these IPPs, removing these government guarantees as a result, and perhaps housing all of these IPPs or these projects in that sort of entity, then I would sort of understand, because it does reduce government's their guarantee scheme, and so then they are able to borrow money and to lend money for other initiatives as well, and also looking at how to reduce tariffs as they currently sit, maybe shifting the power purchase agreements from 20-year power purchase agreements to perhaps 30, 40, or even 50-year power purchase agreements to reduce tariffs. If we're talking about an entity that's going to do something like that, then we're definitely talking. But if it's simply going to replicate what is already existing, then it's just another layer of bureaucracy that we do not need.
Thank you so much for your time, Lungile Mashele, who's an energy economist, on the back of that pronouncements made by President Cyril Ramaphosa this morning, suggesting that he's giving some serious thought to a proposal made by his energy minister that perhaps another power utility, state-owned, should be established. We'll see how this particular one pans out. Up next, the ANC-led arrangement in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality could be kicked out before the end of the month. We speak to the person in the driving seat of an alternative that is being contemplated. Ongoing. The ANC-led arrangement in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality could end before the end of this month. After a good few months of delicate negotiations, the Democratic Alliance has apparently managed to strike a deal with several of the smaller parties represented in the council, including some that are currently in bed with the ANC. Leading the conversations on behalf of the DA has been its federal chairperson, Helen Zille, who joins us on the line. Good evening, Helen. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
So, it's been, you've been at it. I'm told you've made no less than 8 visits or trips to the Bay, trying to get these parties together. What is this progress that you've managed to make this week, which is giving all of you partners in this new coalition arrangement hope that things are finally going to change for the better, hopefully?
Well, coalitions are very complex things, and especially in Nelson Mandela Bay, because there are 2 very big parties. The DA was the biggest party in Nelson Mandela Bay, then close second came the ANC, and then there were a whole range of very, very small parties, 1, 2-seat parties, sometimes maximum 3 seats, but the 3-seat party has such a lot of internal conflict that they've suspended their councillors. So we're left with parties that have 1 seat or 2 seats. And they make up the balance to get to 50%. And to try and put a government together that's stable, you need to try and get to 50%. Now, the ANC coalition is currently in charge, and that is torn apart by conflict and division. And we've seen a lot of that play out in public. So we were approached by several of the smaller parties to say, would the DA then please step into the breach, because none of those smaller parties can get into government without either the DA or the ANC. And we said, we don't just take over governments. When we take over governments, there's got to be a reasonable chance that they can work. And we've got to have a really strong agreement based on principles, values, policy choices, and then systems, processes, all of the things that are needed to make a coalition government work. And that's a long process of negotiation. It doesn't just involve dishing out positions, as some people think it involves. It's a very long and complex process. And we've been through that long and complex process. And now there are 7 parties that we believe will sign on to the arrangement. But of course, that's just the start of the process inside the DA, because when we have a proposed coalition agreement, I have to take it back to our federal executive, table it before our federal executive, and they will either accept that we've been through all the hoops and have a chance of success, or they will say, no, this is not a coalition that we believe can succeed. So we are going to take it to the federal executive, and we will see what their response is.
Any timelines?
Well, we've been negotiating now for 6-7 months, and we don't want to rush it. When we get this coalition together, if we do, and if we get the go-ahead to do that, there's first got to be a motion of no confidence in the current arrangement led by the ANC. And if that succeeds, then there's got to be nominations and a re-election of a new government. And we're hoping that will take place swiftly, because this state of uncertainty is not good for Nelson Mandela Bay. They're also hovering on the edge of day zero. There has been some rain recently, which has brought some great relief, but it hasn't lifted the drought in any significant way. And so Nelson Mandela Bay faces very, very serious challenges, and the uncertainty is adding to it very significantly.
Before I go to my next question, perhaps let me ask this. You have said, I mean, the last time you were on the program on this very same issue, that you'd never go to bed with the ANC. And then when one looks at the rest of the parties that are left, my question then would be, of the small parties, are there specific parties that you will not enter into any arrangement with outside of the ANC? I'm prefacing my second question.
Well, in Nelson Mandela Bay, there are three parties that are wanting to do a deal with us that we're not prepared to do a deal with. One is good for specific reasons that have emerged in Nelson Mandela Bay. People would have seen that playing out on social media in a very destructive way. The other is the Defenders of the People, or otherwise known as DOP. They are far too internally divided. And often when you get a small party that's deeply internally divided, it adds massive complexity to a coalition and brings that instability into the coalition. And the other is the Northern Alliance, for the same reason. The Northern Alliance is so deeply divided that they won 3 seats in council, which was quite big for a newcomer party. But within a couple of weeks, the party had suspended its councillors. And the battle is raging on through the courts now. And it's just impossible to have an arrangement with parties that are so deeply divided that they cannot even determine who their councillors should be. And it's interestingly enough to find that often small parties are the most divided. They will win 1 or 2 seats in the council, but there will be 30 or 40 people who believe that they should get those seats. And so the conflict is massive, and often the smaller the party is, the deeper the conflict.
Now, to my question then, because if you take out those three, good, DOP and the Northern Alliance, that gives you about, what, 56 or thereabouts?
56.
Now, that doesn't give you 50 plus 1.
No, that does not give us 50 plus 1, and it doesn't give us an automatically guaranteed majority.
So what does that mean then?
It means that we could well be the biggest party, but we wouldn't have an overall majority. So we have got a number of minority coalitions around the country. We've got about 11 or 12 minority coalitions around the country. Out of our 39 governments, that's about the number of minority coalitions that we've got. And minority coalitions are unstable, and obviously they're not one's first choice. But we would rather go into a minority coalition with partners we can trust than go into a majority coalition with partners that we can't trust.
But then, I mean, is the Metro not going to go back to square one? Because that has been the big problem. The fact that, you know, today you have this coalition, then the next day you have another coalition, or, you know, things that just get stuck. Things can't be passed because, you know, the numbers keep changing. What if, let's say theoretically, and being very random perhaps here, that an EFF says they decide to vote with your coalition on this one. So they give you the numbers. Then when actual work now needs to be done, they don't vote with you, or they decide to insist on certain things before they can actually vote with you, which then really makes a mockery of what you said right at the beginning, that before you can you've arrived at the position you are in now, with everyone that you've managed to convince, you've had to agree on a number of things, including issues of principle. Let's say whatever demand that the person who's going to give you the vote makes goes against the very same principles, and then this whole thing falls apart again.
Well, the bottom line is this, that our vote is not going to be negotiated with opportunists at all. Obviously, we didn't get a clear majority. We were the biggest party, but we did not get a clear majority. And we will not negotiate with the EFF. We will definitely not negotiate with the EFF. And we will not do any deals with them. And we will not ask any other party to do deals with the EFF on our behalf. We absolutely will not. We will stand on principle. We have a principled negotiated coalition that has yet to be signed. It hasn't yet been signed, but that will be the basis of our working with the 6 other parties who want to be part of our coalition. However, in the end, voters get the government they voted for. And in Nelson Mandela Bay, people voted for a whole range of tiny parties, many of whom have the balance of power, and that will inherently lead to unstable government. That is what the voters voted for. If they vote for the DA, they know what they're getting. They know what our principles are, they know what our values are, they know what we will do, they know what we won't do, and we will stand by that word. We will work with other parties who are prepared to reach an agreement with us, and obviously we do compromise in that agreement. But if we have to violate any of our principles, we prefer to be in opposition. And unfortunately, if that leads to unstable changes of government, that is the consequence of the way the voters voted. And voters really need to understand that. But if they're going to spread their vote out, as is their right and as is their choice, among scores of tiny parties, they're going to have unstable government afterwards.
Helen Zille, let me thank you very much for your time this evening.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for your...
She is, of course, the federal chairperson of the Democratic Alliance. She's been leading her party's negotiations of a new coalition arrangement in the Nelson Mandela Bay. They've made significant progress than there has ever been the case before, but it's not a done deal yet. We'll see how that one pans out as well. Staying with politics, President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's not going to give in to any of his detractors, in or outside of the ANC. Today, members of the ANC protested outside the party's headquarters, giving their leaders 48 hours to suspend or expel their president. It's the latest amid growing calls for Ramaphosa to step down in the wake of the Phala Phala saga, which saw the alleged theft of millions of dollars from his Limpopo farm. Here's SABC journalist Kenny Mapanga reporting from Luthuli House.
Out in their numbers, expressing their unhappiness with how the ANC is handling the issue of the Phala Phala farm in Limpopo, these protesters, dressed in ANC regalia, are demanding that party president Cyril Ramaphosa be suspended pending investigations into the robbery that took place at the farm in 2020. Led by the likes of Carl Niehaus, Supra Mahumapelo and Des van Rooyen.
President Ramaphosa, you know in your heart that something has gone wrong at your house. You know. If you did not know, you wouldn't have spoken to the VIP protection. If you did not know, you wouldn't have given a task to deal with people who gain entry into your house.
Other demands in the memorandum include the reduction of the petrol price and that the first 2 days of the ANC policy conference be converted to a National General Council, with the remaining days dedicated to the policy conference. These ANC members are also demanding that load shedding be a thing of the past in South Africa. The group gave the ANC 48 hours to announce Ramaphosa's suspension.
We, as the members of the ANC, in good standing, we have gathered here coming from different regions and branches across all the provinces of the South Africa. We are here to remind the NEC as the governing leader of this party and an extension of the national leader for South African citizens that we, as the ANC members, we demand the following. Cyril Ramaphosa must resign and must be expelled from the ANC within 48 hours.
The march started 3 hours after the set time from Mary Fitzgerald Square to Luthuli House. The memorandum was received by the ANC's Bongile Besani and Colin Maine. If President Cyril Ramaphosa does not heed to this call by protesters to step down, it remains to be seen how events will play out come Monday. Kani Mapanga, SABC News, Johannesburg.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says he is going nowhere. Speaking at the elective Congress of the SACP, he said he will not be bullied or intimidated by any of his detractors.
We are in the fight for the soul of the African National Congress.
The gloves are now off.
I will not be intimidated, nor distracted, nor bullied into submission. Now, for as long as I'm still privileged to be the President of the Republic, I will do my work.
The ANC leader says he will not let the Phala Phala farm allegations deter him from executing his duties. Ramaphosa called on the communists to be vigilant as the beneficiaries of state capture and corruption wanted to plunder the state.
We should view the orchestrated acts of public violence and the destruction of July 2021. This was a deliberate but unsuccessful effort to foment a popular insurrection against the democratic state and our constitutional order with the intention of shielding those responsible for wrongdoing from accountability. As this alliance, we need to understand that the onslaught on our democracy continues in several overt and covert forms, and we need to remain resolute in our determination to defeat each and every effort to derail the national democratic revolution.
The ANC president also said the governing party was at a crossroads as the battle for the control of the party is intensified.
We will never succumb to the manipulation and disinformation, to the abuse of office, to the undermining of democratic institutions, or to the threat of violence or insurrections. We are in the fight, comrades. We are in the fight for the soul of the African National Congress. And we will not back down for fighting to ensure that the ANC is revived. We are also in the fight for the survival of our democracy. We are in the fight for the survival of our way of life, our way of doing things.
In a parting shot aimed at his detractors who have called for Ramaphosa to step aside, a buoyant ANC president had this message.
We will not submit and we will not relent, nor will we ever give in.
Ramaphosa is due to address the ANC's provincial conference in KwaZulu-Natal next weekend, a conference that will test his influence and power in the party in the run-up to the December National Conference. Samkele Masego, SABC News, Boksburg.
Dr. Levi Ndo is a political analyst and joins us on the line. Evening, Dr. Ndo. Thank you very much for your time. The gloves are off.
Evening, Vuyo. Evening to the viewers at home. Indeed, the gloves are off. The question would be, are we surprised? I am not surprised. This is what I actually expected for some time. And these events are actually unfolding at the right time. The timing is quite correct. And I think the ground is also quite fertile for this kind of activities to happen. This is the road that the ANC, in my view, is going to be taking until December when they go to the National Conference.
Strong words from the ANC president. It looks like he's ready for maybe I should say, as ready for a fight as he could ever be?
Well, it is also going to be based on the support and the action that has to be taken by those who are in support of him as the president and for his second term. But if you look at the events that unfolded today, it is actually the common faces that I expected to participate in the march. And that also confirms that the unity project that the ANC has been talking about for the past 3 to 4 years appears not to have worked. Equally, it is also a demonstration of the rift that is in existence in the party, and instead of seeing party members or members of the ANC coming together as promised in Nasrec, they appear to be actually drifting apart on a regular basis. Another observation that I've made is that it also appears as if you have got the ANC that is functioning within the structures of the ANC, and another ANC that is also functioning outside the structures of the ANC. I say so because when the posters for today's march were actually circulating, you have had other structures of the ANC making statements that they are not part to this march, and also warning members of the party not to participate in this action. So it's clear that there are those that are operating within the framework or structures of the ANC, and those that are doing so outside the structures of the ANC.
In fact, the ANC's information and publicity desk dismissed the poster as fake, which was an interesting thing on its own. But I mean, Dr. Ndo, was it realistic in the first place to even think that the Unity Project would indeed, be successful, given the reality that there are people, some of whom we saw there, who regard themselves as seniors, some of whom believe they deserve to be in positions of power and authority, cabinet and elsewhere, but who know that they have been, or feel that they have been excluded on the basis that they don't support their president. So, I mean, was it realistic then to even expect that there would be a unity project and everyone would abide by? And considering the fact that some of them, in fact, the ANC is what stands between them and going to jail, or to oblivion.
The party or any political party has to test its strength, or it derives its strength from unity and cohesion amongst its members. And when the ANC realized that there is a threat of disunity within its ranks, it then had to take action to ensure that they need to fight or ensure that the infighting within the party do not continue to exist, and try to forge unity within its ranks. Unfortunately, even though the ANC is on a project of renewal, it's on the project to ensure that there's unity, you still have other elements that appears not to be joining the chorus of uniting the party. And that's why you still have these kind of elements existing within the party. Another aspect that I've observed is that it appears as if you still have members of the ANC who are still in denial about the election's outcome in Nasrec. And that is one thing that for me appears to be a very, very big factor within the ANC. But the events that have actually happened in relation to Parapara, matters that are relating to the food prices, the oil prices, and a number of economic burdens that ordinary citizens are going through, would actually be some of the issues that can be used by those that are against the leadership of Ramaphosa in the ANC and in the party. And they would actually find ways to ensure that they raise these issues, whether it is inside the structures of the ANC or outside the structures of the ANC. And in my view, you wouldn't have expected to see members of the ANC marching and raising issues the way they did today, because you expect members of the ANC to raise these kind of issues within the structures of the party. So the divisions that are there in the party are actually being demonstrated openly. They are out in the public, and that tells you that this is the right time for the oppositions to stand against the ANC, because the ANC is clearly divided.
Well, we have already seen, only yesterday, a couple of days ago, the EFF planning its own activities, which it hopes will have the support of many within the ANC. Dr. Livaindo, let me thank you very much for your time this evening. To this now, government during the SONA 2022 debate announced that they will roll out more than 33,000 community Wi-Fi and broadband to household, making a further promise of 10 gigabytes of free data for each and every household. Friends of a free internet say this is not enough. And joining us now is Mark Weinberg, representing Friends of a Free Internet, and Chia Momalaji from Tech Empire. But before we do that, take a listen to what the Minister of Communication and Digital Technologies had to say during the debate of the State of the Nation address some months ago.
We will roll out more than 33,000 community Wi-Fi and broadband to households. To support economic transformation, the department has revised the plan to include SMMEs and other network service providers, such as the internet service providers, the wireless access providers, the mobile virtual network operators, and other SMMEs in the networking space to participate in the delivery of broadband to communities, household connectivities, but also connecting our government sites. It is expected that 3,700 jobs will be created with participation of the ISPs, MVNOs, and SMMEs. This is part of the commitment to ensure that all South Africans have access to the internet by 2024. And we're not saying it will start in 2024, we're saying it's starting now.
Mark Weinberg, have you seen any evidence that it is starting now?
Good evening to you and your viewers. Evidence that it's starting now, it seems with the ministry seems to always start with a lot of talking. And in the case of digital migration, that talking went on for more than a decade. So we're hoping there's going to be a better outcome this time around. The cell phone operators having given a massive boost with the new spectrum, which comes with conditions to connect everybody. So we're going to have to do a lot of work to hold them accountable.
Well, I mean, on this, one of the interesting things there from what that's the speech that the minister made a while ago was that there was in the written text of her speech during the State of the Nation address speech a part that she actually did not read out. It wasn't the written text, but she didn't say it in the that the stuff about the 33,000 community Wi-Fi and broadband to household. Then where she also said in the written text, we intend to provide 10 gigabytes of free data for each and every household, irrespective of their income level and place they live. It's a promise that had been there, but which was obviously willfully omitted during that speech. I don't know whether I'm reading too much into it, Chairman.
Yeah, I mean, we need to ask lots of questions about government's promises to us, especially because municipalities across the country have made many local promises to have internet access at crucial data points, libraries, schools, community buildings, for instance, and a lot of these municipalities have failed to provide this at a local level. At a national level, we've had lots of promises made from government departments about digital migration, which took a long time. You know, here in the media space, you'd also know that a lot of promises have been made in the media space too that haven't always materialized. So I would say that when it comes to a promise like 10 gigabytes in every household, we have to first see it being implemented to believe it. But secondly, I think it's really important that we look at the details. So exactly how do they plan to source this infrastructure? Are they doing it through a collaboration with private partners? Or will they be forming their own infrastructure within local communities? Is it going to be some kind of subsidy program provided to large, providers like, MTN, Vodacom, Cell C, etc., to give people mobile data? Because most people living in rural and township areas in South Africa are accessing the internet through mobile plans, not through things such as broadband and fiber. So are they planning to install broadband infrastructure in townships? So there's a lot of details that hasn't been provided with this commitment, which would mean that it's not something we should trust.
Hence my question, because the omission would suggest, Tiamo, that perhaps you realize that it's either not going to happen or it's going to take a while before she's certain. In other words, before she can actually make that promise again, because she has perhaps realized that it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, definitely. We should always ask for more details. It also is something that appeases us. It makes us feel like something's coming and then nothing comes. It's very catchy, 10 gigabytes for every household, a chicken in every pot. I think what we should do as communities, apart from pressuring our local municipalities, because at a national level, it's very difficult for us to obviously talk to the minister. But as people at a local level, we need to keep pressuring our municipalities to also implement public Wi-Fi initiatives, not just at a national level. But secondly, I think that we don't have a lot of organizing around this issue, and that allows the government to make promises and not keep them.
And I guess, that's why you are really mobilizing around this campaign, Mark, to really get communities to understand first what this means and to actually demand a delivery. Besides, it would really be a betrayal, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be if the government was not to deliver on this given? Yes, it has taken time, but eventually it did give through the program of structural reforms. We saw the auction happening. A lot of money was raised. The big players, have some of the spectrum that they need. So perhaps it's their turn to also move swiftly and not to even wait for government, but to say, hey, we are here, seeing that you have finally delivered. We are also, as good corporate citizens, are going to reciprocate.
Yes, I think if South Africans know one thing, it's don't. They've been making super profits for decades, and not giving much thought to the communication rights of ordinary people. So we're not going to wait for a gift from them. We're going to have to push them. Now, ICASA is saying that in exchange for the massive spectrum that's been handed over, they need to connect rural areas. They need to give coverage to 97% of South Africa. They need to zero it. NPO websites, which would make those websites completely free to visit. And the minister's promise of 30 gigs, Siam was quite right. It can be done, but we're going to have to push the operators. And I think he's also quite right when he says we need to look at local solutions. Municipalities, community groups can build community networks, but there will need to be policy and cross-subsidization.
Do you see that happening?
Sorry, I missed that.
Do you see that cross-subsidization happening anytime soon, given everything that the government has said up until now, or not said?
Yeah. Well, at the moment, there's massive cross-subsidization happening where you find pay-as-you-go people are cross-subsidizing people on monthly contracts. So essentially, the poor are cross-subsidizing the rich at the moment. I think the most hopeful thing are the spectrum conditions, which oblige the operators to invest in infrastructure in rural areas, remote areas, and oblige them to connect government buildings, which is the backbone of the free broadband that we're talking about tonight. So it's not going to happen without a fight. And we can't count on ICASA, the government alone. I think we saw when South Africans mobilized around fees, data must fall, that the government sat up, the Competition Commission got involved, and we saw a real decline in prices, money put back into people's pockets. It's going to take another campaign of that popular scale.
Okay.
To get real delivery on these promises.
Thank you, Mark Weinberg from the Friends of a Free Internet and Tsiamo Malachi from Tech Empire, urging communities, of course, to rally behind this cause of a free data for each and every household, irrespective of your income levels or where you live. It's a right we should all enjoy, irrespective of our economic status. But as both were saying, it's going to take a big effort, a big fight to make this happen, in spite of all the promises that are being made, whether by the government or, of course, by the big players who have been making loads and loads of money up until now. And that's our show for tonight and for this week. Do join us again on Monday, same time. Have a good night and a great weekend.